Hi, you're with Julian on the Brown Note and a review of the latest Angel Olsen album, Big Time. The singer-born Angelina Maria Carroll in St. Louis, Missouri. Currently, I believe, in North Carolina. She's risen to the heights of one of the most prominent female songwriters in America over the course of 5 or so albums. I missed out on her first two. Halfway Home and a very well-received Burn Your Fire for No Witness in 2014. But I got firmly on the Angel Olsen bandwagon with My Woman in 2016, which blew me away and was in my albums of the year. And Shut Up, Kiss Me, Hold Me Tight was my #1 track that year. I became completely infatuated with her. After seeing her live as well on that tour, she was just, like Debbie Harry levels of cool and sexy and just awesome. After that, My Woman, which I still think is my favourite, she came out with a surprising left turn with All Mirrors, which posited her more. It was like an art pop record, so she was a lot closer to people like Mitski or St. Vincent here, whereas the previous album had been pretty guitar indie / the country that's always been there. This one was all sort of maxed out synths and really fascinating album, another great album. And then she followed that with Whole New Mess, which was the opposite version of All Mirrors, where she'd gone even further beyond My Woman to make a very reverby, minimalist, guitar-based, ghostly version of the maximalist All Mirrors, and I actually liked it a little more. And I kind of feel like there's another album version of that out there, which is between both those records, where there's the perfect version of it. But she certainly established herself as one of the preeminent singer-songwriters of her age, in an age where female singer-songwriters have really become the dominant force. There are so many that have dominated my albums of the year lists. And she's come back with Big Time. Now, this is another jink, but instead of going into the maximalist art pop of All Mirrors, or denuding that of all of that with the more sort of minimalist follow-up, this time she's gone pretty much full-blown country. Another very acclaimed album called Big Time. The things to point out is that she came out as queer, and weeks later her parents died. How the hell does... What do you say to that? In the run-up to recording this album. So I think her new partner's female, and obviously a lot of this album is dealing with that, but also the grief of her parents dying from, I believe, natural causes within weeks of each other. So it's an album that comes from a very, very dark place. It introduces itself via the very gentle All the Good Times, very low-key melodic country that builds into sort of crescendo in the chorus, that quiet, loud, dynamic sort of situation. It's also a little bit inconsequential. And it's like, if there's several tracks on this album that I feel drift by a bit and aren't, that compelling. It's a little bit inconsequential, and another thing is that half of the lyrics on this album are painfully about her, but I feel like another half of them are pretty universal, to the point of them sort of not having that same impact as the second half of the album, which gets very personal and very dark. And that kind of sets a tone for the album as a whole, in general. Big Time, the title track that follows it, again, a lot of these songs have that sort of waltz shuffle. You can imagine like a really gentle sort of waltz shuffle, Neil Young, Harvest Moons, maybe. But it's a much more compelling song. It's one of the biggest tunes on the album. I think the better songs on here, one, have very personal, often painful lyrics rather than universal, and the better melodies. And this one's got one of the biggest tunes. It sounded like the band, that 60s, 70s, very famous act called The Band, sort of The Night They Drove All Dixie Down, they do a lot of that waltzing as well, and that's that came through on that track, I thought. Again, Dream Thing, bit inconsequential, just drifts by a lot, and I, kind of forget you're listening to it. The Ghost On, I thought, was lovely. It's got a much stronger, more memorable melody, and it's really ghostly as well, and almost had me thinking of the recently departed Julie Cruz. And I kind of wish if there's another problem with this album, is a lot of the instrumentation is very, very gentle. But I almost wish she pushed it even further minimalist, because this one's really ghostly. I don't think there's any sort of rhythmic backing at all. But it was a lovely track. And the follow-up, All the Flowers, probably has the softest vocal on the whole album. Almost no backing music at all. So it's sort of like, it's become very ethereal by this. Things do get more compelling with Right Now, which is track 6. I think the next two tracks, Right Now and This Is How It Works, are probably and Go Home is the strong run on the album. It feels like the centerpiece of the album emotionally as well. It uses her voice in not just a whisper that occasionally rises up, but it uses the full spectrum of what is clearly the weapon on this album, which is Angel Olsen's incredible singing voice, which is a plus and a minus, because I feel like she can sing really quietly yet sound really full-bodied, even if she's singing in a whisper. You can't hide the strength in her voice, or she can shriek. And I kind of feel like that might butter up some of the lesser compositions on the album as being valid, because she can make anything sound good. But it's got a great, the loud soft dynamic on Right Now is much more pulverizing. It gets into, unexpectedly, a slightly Bowie-esque glam stomp, including with electric guitars. One of the few times they seem to rise up with any sort of distortion. Definitely one of the centerpieces and cathartic coders on the album, I thought. And 7, even though This Is How It Works is perhaps not as consequential, it's sort of another of the musically drifty tracks on the album. It's elevated by the lyrics, which are now getting really painful. I'm tired of saying I'm tired. This is how it works for me now. It's a despairingly bleak song. It really juts out. Made me think of Big Star in that sort of Sister Lovers era. A crying for help sort of song. It's actually quite painful to listen to the lyrics. And the same, I think, on Go Home as well. Another one where she's nobody knows me. I'm a ghost now. And she's talking about leaving somewhere where no one even knows her, to go home. It's a great song. It's got a welcome bass figure on it, which sits in the background, but adds a bit of musicality that's kind of missing on a lot of the tracks. It's another of the stronger and fuller tracks. The chorus on it's really soaring, but the lyrics again are so bleak. Through the Fires is like a come down. It sort of slips back into the universality of the lyrics, and it's another drifty track. The final one is a welcome respite. Chasing the Sun is something I wish she'd done a lot more of on this album. It's really happy, it's wistful, it's playful, it's very personal. She's clearly singing about herself and hanging out with her new lover and not doing anything, and them having this big secret on the world, and it really works. I can understand them positing this at the end as like this light coming out of the tunnel, but given the maudlin nature of much of the album, we could have done with a lot more of that. So it is a good album. I think like the universality of certainly the first half of the album and a lot of the lyrics aren't anywhere near as interesting as the more personal. They sort of become a bit bland. The reliance on her voice to carry everything, there's not enough attention, I don't think, paid to the musical backings, because they can just use her singing to get away with it, and that makes the music quite samey and in pace as well. So the pacing of the album can, if you stare straight at the album, it can get a bit boring. It works much better as sort of background music. I think it's the kind of album you've got to be in the right mood to listen to. Overall, it is a good album. It's not quite as stellar as everyone is going nuts about it for, and probably my least favourite Angel Olsen album, but still a 7 out of 10 for Angel Olsen and Big Time. And Angel, I am still here for you, waiting for you.